Hey, this is Ask the Pastor. This is where I take questions from the internet and I do my best to answer every question I get sent. Here's a question that we're talking about today. Is human nature intrinsically evil because of original sin? Boy, this is a really loaded question. There are a bunch of what I would call terms in this. You know, it's one thing for something to be a word, and it's another thing for it to be a term. For instance, I know what a college is, I know what a park is, but then college park, when you put those two words together, it means my neighborhood. It means something different. And college park is neither a college nor a park. It's a term that means something else. So, are human beings intrinsically evil due to original sin? Well, I would say that we are, to our core, in our human nature, all of us, and it's normal and it's typical, evil. We're selfish. We're depraved. We're enemies of God. We all, none of us automatically love God or love goodness. We seek to run from that light, and it is only by the mercy of God working in us that we can learn to love truth and goodness and to seek after it. Now, that doesn't mean that we're all, little devils that are just seeking to hate for the sake of hate, right? We're not chaotic evil in like the Dungeons and Dragons sense, where we're like, blood and gore for no reason. But we're selfish. We seek our good, even if it causes greater pain to more people elsewhere. We have a tendency not to look to the interests of others, but to look to our own interests first, and potentially, when our interests and the interests of others conflict, to actively harm our neighbor rather than love our neighbor. And one of the ways to describe that is evil. But as a term, a lot of the ways people use evil is to mean like especially bad, right? When we say, boy, that Osama bin Laden, he's really evil. What we mean is evil in a way different from you and I. And no, we're not all especially bad. What we are all is normally bad. We're like the plain old boring kind of bad. And this is true in psychology. If you study psychology, if you know about the Zimbardo experiment or the Milgram experiment, evil is banal. It's just normal. And what actually causes like great suffering and great tragedy to happen is not someone who's like, evil death. It's actually someone who's like, oh man, I'm just following orders. I just don't have a lot of moral backbone to me, so I'll just do what I'm told. That's what we all are born with. The second term there is original sin. Now that can mean a lot of things. Some people use that to mean that because Adam and Eve in the garden, who are our great-great-great-great-grandparents, sinned, we are born guilty of sin. That is, God is already, even if we never commit any sins during our lifetime, God is already going to send us to hell unless we get forgiven because of the sin that Adam and Eve committed. I am not inclined to believe that's true. I don't see any reason biblically to interpret any verse that way, to build that theology. Another interpretation would be because there are great-grandparents, we are all born with the tendency to sin. They had the tendency to sin. We inherited that tendency from them. And so because they sinned, we know you're gonna sin. Because everybody's gonna sin. I'm expecting a child next month. She's gonna sin. She's just going to. It's just who she is. I'm a lot closer to believing that that is true. But I would even go farther back and say, because everyone's gonna sin, right? Because everyone has always sinned, that means when there was a first person, they sinned. And so that's why we tell that story. We don't tell that story because we knew them first and then we knew us. We actually knew us first. and the community that wrote that story down and that preserved that story and carried it through the centuries and the millennia all the way to us, wrote it because they knew themselves, not because they knew Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were already dead by the time they were writing about Adam and Eve. They were talking about themselves to say everyone has sinned. And so the story of Adam and Eve, the story of original sin, is the story of you and I. It's the story of who we are and what we do. And what do? Boring, non-especially curse of evil death kind of evil. Like just blasé selfishness, not having a backbone. That's what we're like. I hope I answered your question. If I answered your question, I want to encourage you to share it. If I didn't answer the question and you've got a problem with it, maybe one of those other theories of original sin, you've got a verse that proves it and I didn't think of that verse, I want to learn more about the Bible. I'd love to see that verse. Why don't you get a cell phone camera, point it at yourself, make a video, I'll put it on this channel, we can talk. Or if you've got your own question, you can ask me, send it in, and you can watch these videos up here. Thank you all.